This week on Hacking TV, the biggest new player in Hollywood may be a company you've never even heard of. What in the world is Wanda? And why did they just buy the venerable Dick Clark Productions?
Then, as Verizon and even Google dampen their broadband ambitions, Comcast's Xfinity X1 is zooming ahead.
And big news in the programming land world, Netflix, the New York Times, and Vimeo all making big moves.
I'm Saul Hansell.
And I'm Steve Rosenbaum. And this is
Hacking TV.
Indeed it is, and we are ready to hack. So let's just dive into this Wanda thing. I mean, both of us, I've just started to hear kind of the rumblings of the word Wanda recently. And let's just start with the big purchase. They're buying Dick Clark Productions. So Dick Clark Productions, for those of you who don't know, owns all kinds of television shows. They own the rights to, for example, the Golden Globes. And it turns out that in the world in which lots of people are skipping commercials, the Golden Globes are really valuable because they're live events that people don't skip. And yet, Dick Clark sold for $175 million not that long ago, then flipped over for another deal for $300 million, then another deal for $500 million. And the Wanda guys are buying it for $1 billion. $1 billion.
So it's good business, and I would argue that the history of foreigners buying American Hollywood assets is they like a little bit of arm candy. They like, and nobody gets more celebrities in a more concentrated way than award shows. So if you had all the money in the world, which as best as we can tell is the amount of money that Wanda, or what's it called, Daylin Wanda Group, the largest company in China, if you had that much money, why not buy yourself a ticket to the Golden Globes and etc.?
Well, not to disagree with you about arm candy, but in this case, I think if you look at Daylin Wanda's, what he's been doing now for a number of years, he's already China's largest landowner. He owns, remind me now, hotels. What else did you say?
He is, property, hotels, department stores, and culture and entertainment, meaning movie studios and such. And he, in the U.S., he bought Legendary Entertainment, which has produced everything from, some of the Batman movies to the Steve Jobs movie. And he bought AMC Theaters, so he owns a movie theater in your neighborhood.
So it would be, Hollywood has a history of kind of accepting whatever money happens to be green at that given moment. I was going to say dumb money, but I don't think that's appropriate given the strategy here. But the Wanda chairman is doing a number of things in parallel that tell me that his vision for Hollywood is actually quite strategic. One is they're building a massive studio that is going to have the ability to write pretty significant production rebates.
Right. So it looks like they want to be the Foxconn of movies. Foxconn is the Chinese company that makes most of the iPhones and all kinds of other electronics for American companies that just have a handful of people who design stuff but don't build anything. Right. And similarly, the proposition here is you might have writers here, but you'll have all of your camera people and all the technicians in China where they'll do it cheaper. And he's putting $5 to $8 billion into this giant movie factory.
And by the way, this is not some secret Chinese strategy. I mean, North Carolina has incentives. Canada has movie incentives. There have been throughout history, regions that want movie production business and are willing to create production incentives. This is just a particularly big number. 40% is no joke.
Well, 40% and the scale of the facility that they're building, right? I mean, there's, a lot of cities will say, come make a movie here, but they don't have much facility, right? You can shoot on location in North Carolina and get a rebate for what you spend, but it's different than $8 billion, factory with, laborers bust in from the countryside who will edit movies for 18-hour shifts.
So one might expect, given the current build a wall political climate in the U.S. that that there might be some fear in Hollywood about taking China's money. But as you explained it to me, there was an event in Hollywood in which pretty much everyone who's anyone showed up to cheer on the Wanda investment.
Right. So they had a glittering party that had the mayor of Los Angeles and the head of the Motion Picture Academy of Arts and Sciences and all the Hollywood press and all the studio people announcing, their deal, which of course is ironic because mostly, the city of Los Angeles is trying to get people to move production back to Hollywood and not to outsource it to wherever they're going to outsource it to. But these guys have money, and they've said outright that they want to buy one of the big six studios. So they're, they haven't made too many enemies yet.
So when you say build one of the big six, I mean, buy one of the big six, like, is that reasonable? Is somebody for sale?
Well, let's see. Time Warner just got sold. So Warner Pictures just got sold to AT&T. So unless they want to come and outbid for the whole thing, no. Universal, which was owned for a while by Panasonic, bad deal, is part of Comcast, so that's not available. But on the other hand, Sony Pictures, Sony is in trouble, and Sony's already done a joint production deal with Wanda, so that's not crazy. Paramount is clearly in play because everything in Viacom is chaotic. And News Corp, 21st Century Fox, medium, right? The Murdochs control it.
What about MGM?
MGM's a notch smaller, and what the hell? It was part of Sony. It's not part of Sony, and I forget who. They could buy MGM. Lots of people have over the years. So as I go through that, my guess is they're bidders for Paramount if that spins out of Viacom, and they're making close friends with Sony.
So Wanda is not going to go away. It's a big player. It's going to continue to spend money. And part of it, frankly, is, China is an enormous, voracious consumer of movies. And if one of the things Wanda can do is lean production in areas where they know they have a Chinese audience and it's not going to step on censors' toes, that kind of sensibility is probably not something you can rent. You probably have to have it internally in that company.
Well, and that goes both ways for Hollywood. Hollywood right now, only a couple dozen Hollywood pictures every year are actually make it past the censors into distribution in China. They're very concerned about culture. So you could argue that the world's richest guy or the China's richest guy in any case should be powerful enough to get more of his output past the censors. At what cost? I think it's an interesting question. If somebody wants to make a movie talking about political oppression in Tibet, is that going to get distribution at AMC theaters this year? What is the political impact? A company that has built the vast infrastructure of the Great Firewall of China to keep Google from searching on words that they don't think should be searched on is certainly not opposed to using its influence to influence movie studios and so on.
I gotta say, let's go back to Dick Clark for a second. Are we not scratching our heads a little bit? Generally speaking, when production companies shingles that are based on an individual talent, when that talent passes on, there's not a lot of history of there being long-term value in companies with the now namesake gone and basically the remnants of the company surviving that I can think of.
So would you want to own Dick Clark? Is the Golden Globes associated with Dick Clark, that when Dick is gone, then you think the Golden Globes won't be whatever they are?
No, but part of my understanding, when you work with a label that has a celebrity, he can come and help out. He can attract other talent. He can host things. He can voice things over. Like Dick Clark's been gone now a long time. I mean, do they still call it Dick Clark's Rockin' New Year's?
I don't know the answer to that question.
I kind of think they do, but maybe not. Maybe not. It's Ryan Seacrest is now the host of that.
Right. And they still do American Bandstand?
No. But $1 billion for a production company that owns a bunch of licenses, I don't know. I'd love to see the book on that deal. I'd love to see how you get to that asset being and it begs the question, if Dick Clark is worth $1 billion, what's Wanda going to buy next? Let's play for a minute. What would you buy if you were Wanda and you had a bottomless checkbook of U.S. television assets?
I would stay away from the studio business. It's too personality driven. I mean, I probably would argue that investing in movies is like running a Wall Street firm or a hedge fund. It should be done by a partnership. I don't think that being a shareholder in institutions like that is a long-term productive enterprise.
All right, but just to play it out for a second, I mean, would you put money in Viacom?
What do they? I don't know what they really want, right? Their biggest business is apartment buildings in China. That's a fabulous business, except it's denominated in Chinese currency. And so if they want to diversify, I mean, I'd much rather buy apartment buildings where I understand the asset value than entertainment stuff. I mean,
Hulu?
I would go buy Comcast.
Will they buy Hulu?
Lots of people, but there's so many other people who have a better strategic reason to buy Hulu.
By the way, I'm merely taunting you to see if I can get you to say yes to any of these ridiculous ideas. They're going to buy something.
Well, they're gonna buy Sony. I mean, I don't know a thing, but they have a joint production deal with Sony. Sony has, a little bit of old brand cachet and no particular reason for being. So it's that's I could see that. I mean, Sharp is now owned by Foxconn, so I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the faded jewels of Japan end up getting owned by China, including the faded jewels that have, big U.S. followings. You should buy Toyota if you're that rich. But
here's what's interesting, and then we'll move on from Wanda. They own theaters, so they've already got a cultural footprint in China. I don't know enough about the television business in China, but I presume that it's not they don't own television stations and they're not for sale, right? That's all government owned.
I don't know the answer to that question, but
we should find this out.
Okay, so audience member, quick, find out something or know something.
Tweet us at Hacking TV. And what's up with TV in China?
And meanwhile, I'll bet you, like all emerging economies, since everybody who matters has a cell phone, they're all streaming on average more than people in developed nations because that's sort of the way it works. Would you own movie theaters too? Never mind whether you're the richest person in China or like some guy who owns a neighborhood theater, if there is such a thing left. I'm not sure that movie theaters are a long-term growth business. I mean, they're not going to go away to zero, but the percentage of times that you want to watch, I don't know. Are you going to the movies as much today as you did 10 years ago?
No.
Okay.
But China's how far behind?
Theaters in China, I don't know what the culture is. The more packed in you are, the more you want to have another place to escape to.
But you did a really good transition there. So let's go back to it. In this new wired world we live in, Comcast has kind of shown up on our radar for this week's show as doing some surprisingly interesting things in the cable business, which is generally not a sentence you hear, kicking around. What what um what do you make of the X1 footprint, the growing Xfinity Gigabit Pro footprint?
So, I mean, the interesting about Comcast that and I covered Comcast a fair bit 5 years ago, and there were high up in the tower over Philadelphia, very, very smart people who had a very clear-eyed view of how the world was going to move from the cable structure that they had now to an all-internet structure. And they have been operating, and it struck me at the time that none of the stuff that they talked about in the tower was being delivered by all their trucks. And I don't know whether it's taken too long or this is the right time, but they are moving their infrastructure steadily to an internet infrastructure. So the X1 is a couple different things. One, it is a set-top box that is much more digital. It's a lot more like an Apple TV. It doesn't have a hard drive. The DVR is in the cloud. It is the sort of logical kind of set-top box you're going to deliver, and it does a bunch of tricks, one of which we'll talk about in a minute. And meanwhile, basically what's going on in terms of the wires is, right, so the traditional cable had like 135 channels. And when digital cable came in, they compressed a bunch of things and they made 6 channels go down each one of those channels. And when cable modems came in, they made internet go down one of those channels. And if you took all those channels, it has many gigabits of bandwidth. So what they just announced is they're moving to make available the next chunk of bandwidth, and I don't know whether it's 4 or 8 channels now in some standard that allows you to have a gigabit. And so they are slowly cannibalizing the number of channels they devote to TV to put more into the internet, and so they can sell you gigabit internet service for, if you sign a lifetime contract with them, I think $70 a month. And they can do this much cheaper than the phone companies can. And so they have this sort of secret advantage over the phone companies. And they're rolling it out slowly and steadily.
So Verizon is pulling in their horns on Fios, Google is pulling in their horns on Google Fiber, and Comcast is rolling out Gigabit Pro and Gigabit Internet about as quickly as they can get trucks on the street.
And as quickly the engineers develop now. So, because if you live in a place served by Verizon, but they haven't converted to Fios yet, and Comcast, to get Fios into your house, they have to run a new wire from a pole, and they've had to run fiber in and give you all new equipment. Comcast just has to send a guy with a truck and take out some gizmo and put in a new gizmo, no new wires, much cheaper. And
and as they become more of a pipe, a bigger, fatter pipe, they also made this surprising announcement about Netflix, which was not what we were expecting.
What I was expecting.
It was?
Oh, sure. I never had a doubt. So they're saying on this set-top box that's a lot like on Apple TV, you can get Netflix on the same box, and they'll sell it to you, put it on the bill, and take a cut from Netflix. I mean, remember, Netflix is the same as HBO. HBO is owned by Time Warner, soon to be AT&T Time Warner. They sell and will sell HBO. They sell and will sell, they'll sell Netflix. The cable industry is oligopolistic, not monopolistic.
But until very recently, Comcast and Netflix have not been in friendly mode. They've been actually fairly combative.
You can compete. I mean, we're past this. So on certain regulatory issues, the Netflix and Comcast are opposed to each other, although that may or may not stay the case, as Netflix can cut these deals, right? So the question is, can Comcast give preference to NBC properties over Netflix on their broadband? right? Does net neutrality require Comcast to treat everybody on its wires the same? And, Netflix worrying about being cut out wants to be treated the same. It doesn't want to be at a disadvantage. And Comcast wants to use its wires any which way it feels like, thank you. And if Netflix, which has lots of money, can just come to a financial deal with people like Comcast, maybe Netflix isn't so active in Washington.
Stay tuned on that one. So,
what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I certainly think that their decision to let Netflix Fox in the henhouse in, I think Netflix had to give them a deal that they were comfortable with in terms of what the rev share was. There's no rev share when I go to Netflix via my TiVo box or my Roku box. What?
Oh, sure there is. Depending on how you subscribe, if the first thing you do is subscribe through Roku gets a stream of money. If you subscribe through Apple gets 30%.
Right, but if I have a deal with Netflix Direct, which is what I have.
Right, so they pay for distribution, and so the deal is if Comcast can sell you a bundle that includes Netflix, then Netflix will pay them a spiff. If Netflix has a direct, so since Netflix already has half the households in America, maybe a little more, they don't have to worry about everybody signing up through Comcast and having to give a spiff on everybody. So there's competition for the, young people, new household formation, for the last 30% of the people who don't have Netflix. But so Netflix's risk on the commission is lower, but yeah, it's a business deal.
All right, so let's move on to more programming news because we got a few minutes left and I want to make sure we touch some things. So this New York Times Samsung announcement that they're launching an immersive 360-degree video journalism project that will have a new element, a minimum of one new piece every day, I think is a big, big deal.
Right, so Samsung is rich and in the doghouse this week. So they still have cash, but their products keep blowing up. And they've got a bunch of VR products, and VR sounds cool.
Hold on. Just to be fair, the 360 Samsung camera is not blowing up.
Okay. A couple of their
Although
products.
It looks a little like a bomb if you think about it.
I would be less likely to want to put something directly on my eyes if I thought that the company that made it made stuff that blew up. But just saying.
That's really mean.
I am not a mean person. And
that's very funny.
I think all this stuff blows over because it always does.
I use Tylenol.
Yes, we all do. So so it's smart. Look, if the New York Times is looking to sell sponsorship deals, and it's a logical deal, high prestige brand, which can make content that is particularly interesting on a device that you make and Apple doesn't make. That's a logical deal. And it helps get the Times to get some volume. I don't know, what percent of the cost of making this stuff the sponsorship deal underwrites, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's 150. And
I'm tuning into the daily VR on the Times to see what they're doing. That excites me. I'm glad to see them working in that space.
Well, look, I went to the Whitney has a show that I wanted to talk about on this podcast, but it's not that interesting. What's called Dreamscapes, all about the history of immersive media over the last 100 years. I spent a bunch of time there yesterday, and it's all very abstract and arty and sort of interesting, but it, with rare exception, didn't have a lot to say to this world. But there was a place where you went and you put on red and blue 3D glasses, and somebody was playing with that as a form, and I did that, and it's sort of interesting, but we have not seen that form of 3D take over the world, right? It's sort of cool for a minute, and then it's more a gimmick than not. So I'm still trying to figure out what the equilibrium point is. Where is the extra hassle from immersive 360 3D VR worth it creatively? And
I think, as they say, only time will tell.
Exactly. So if you're the Times and you want to be, people write 10 times more stories about, a gimmicky VR thing you do flying on a helicopter over Manhattan than like a really solid investigation into some sort of corrupt something or another. Why not devote a little bit of your time to experimenting in something where if it becomes big, you can be a leader, and if not, at least you get some press and sound progressive, and you can sell sponsorships to Samsung for 150% of your costs. I made up that number, but I like it.
So at the same time, there's this odd positive negative press coverage of Netflix kind of strangely eating the BBC's lunch. And do we care that that Netflix is now stepping into kind of the rarefied space of doing British period drama? This is a show called The Crown. And the reviews have been very, very good. Reed Hastings said it's the only thing they produced that he watched twice.
Americans love, things with like palaces and horse and buggies and so on. It's not a bold move in taking risks to make a lush series about Queen Elizabeth. It's as conservative a move as they come, except he's writing a big check, but he's got a lot of money.
But the BBC's genuinely worried about this. I mean, so Danny Cohen, who's the head of the BBC's head of television, admitted the corporation, this is a quote, couldn't compete with the amount of money Netflix was prepared to pay for a classic BBC subject.
And their audience is saying, hey, BBC, you haven't done enough stuff about British monarchs. You just never cover Queen Elizabeth II, for example. I'm not shedding tears for the BBC that they lost out on this one.
So the story, as it's reported, says that that Netflix committed £100 million within 40 minutes of sitting down to discuss the project. They bought it in the room.
Okay. And so the interesting question is Netflix the PBS of the, news streaming world and not the Fox? Or do they think they can be the PBS and the Fox?
That's a really good question. I mean, I would think that they think they can be both.
I mean, I am a big believer that brands have to stand for something. And yes, Netflix has stood in an earlier age for everything, all the movies you ever want to watch. So that's a reasonably broad thing. But they have been mostly, competing. They certainly have tried to be an HBO. High quality, high production. I mean, if you say it's a Netflix production, it's starting to have the association of an HBO production. Expensive, well done. But how broad do they get?
All right, last thing, we've got just a minute left. Vimeo is launching a new consumer-facing subscription service.
What? Vimeo, right. They're not bankrupt yet? No, I guess Barry Diller owns them and hasn't pulled the plug. But
you don't think this is going to be a...
Let's just point out. As we've pointed out, who else has tried to do random subscription services that have no brand value and don't stand for anything? YouTube Red. Vessel, dead. VHX got bought by Vimeo because they couldn't make a go of it. Right? What this is a model that has been a complete failure. Nobody wants the product. Why do you think you can make one? Now, they have an answer to that, which is they are a professional hosting platform for a certain group of independent video and film people, some of whom make $1 or $2 selling little pay-per-views and stuff.
And with that, we are out of time. Ding, 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 ding.
I don't want to talk about the Vimeo subscription service for hours on end. I mean, they're going to give Wanda a run for their money. You can't cut it off now, Steve.
Have a fabulous week. Hack away, and we will see you guys all again next weekend. Hack on.
Keep on hacking, and buy that Vimeo service. I'm sure it's going to be really great.